Late at night, Voss Dynamics Global Headquarters. CEO Clara Voss, 32, a figure of polished power and cold intensity, strode down the deserted 30th floor corridor. She paused, frowning, seeing a janitor, a quiet man in old overalls, meticulously scrubbing a small invisible stain. "Still here, Ward? It's past midnight." "Just a few smudges, ma'am. Must be clean before morning," he replied calmly. She scoffed, a brittle sound. "You work like you're saving the world, Mr. Hayes." "No, ma'am," he said softly, looking at the gleaming floor. "Just trying to keep it from getting dirtier." She let out a dismissive, mirthless laugh, turning her back, unaware that in a few short hours, a single utterance of his nickname would bring her entire corporate empire to a terrified standstill. Daniel Hayes, 38, a dedicated single father, was the ghost of the Voss Dynamics Tower. His shift began precisely when the city lights became pinpricks below the windows, and ended just before the harsh fluorescent glow of the first executive desk lamp flared on. His uniform, worn gray overalls, and the quiet dignity of a man who saw the world but wished to remain unseen. He was the janitor. He was the silent, necessary counterbalance to the empire's noise. His previous life was an echo of thunder, a decorated rescue engineer, a system architect, a man who built security layers so impenetrable they were dubbed ghost shields. He'd walked away 8 long years ago, leaving the chaos of his profession behind, following the catastrophic explosion that claimed his wife Mara, a loss that left him with 8-year-old Lily. Now, his days were devoted entirely to Lily, navigating school schedules and homework, and his nights were spent scrubbing the floors of the very company he had once helped design, cleaning the halls where his genius was born and where his heart was subsequently broken. His work was silent, yet obsessive, polishing every marble stair like polishing a painful, distant memory of her smile. He had a routine: the basement storage, the executive garages, and finally the pristine, rarely used technical floors, the very nerves of the company's global operation. Daniel wasn't just cleaning, he was performing an inventory of flaws, a silent inspection of the system he knew better than its creators. He noticed every loose cable, every overheated server rack, every subtle degradation that the millions spent on maintenance failed to catch. He fixed these minor things in passing, a quick twist of a wrench, a reseated connection, because that's what an engineer did, regardless of the uniform. Clara Voss, 34, was the historic first female CEO of the leading European security firm. Her rise was meteoric, a trail of eliminated rivals and billion-dollar contracts. She was ruthlessly brilliant, supremely powerful, and infamous for her cold, untouchable arrogance. She ruled Voss Dynamics with the certainty that the world was divided into 2 groups: those who controlled her and those who were controlled, everyone else. To Clara, success meant total, absolute control, and a failure was anyone who couldn't command the room or the market. A person without authority, like a janitor, was simply irrelevant, a background fixture, almost less than a chair. One Tuesday night, Clara, driven by her own neurotic perfectionism, was conducting a late-stage inspection of the high-security technical floor. The floor was spotless, yet she found fault immediately. She saw Daniel meticulously scrubbing a section of industrial tiling near a server bank. "Why the delay, mister?" "Hayes, this floor was scheduled to be finished an hour ago," Clara demanded, her voice cutting through the hum of the servers. "How long does it realistically take to mop a single hallway?" Daniel stood, his back straight, meeting her gaze with an unnerving calm. "It's not finished, ma'am. While it's still dirty, it's not finished. This corner had residual oil from a leak yesterday." "I hire janitors," she snapped, her frustration rising at his lack of visible haste. "I don't hire philosophers. Time is money, Mr. Hayes. Efficiency is everything." "Then I sincerely apologize, ma'am," Daniel returned, without raising his voice or looking down. "I simply don't know how to clean by pretending it's clean." His calm, unyielding response, which was not insubordination, but a simple statement of professional integrity, infuriated her far more than any blatant argument would have. It challenged her core belief that everything could be manipulated or hurried. He looked at the floor the way I look at my balance sheet, she thought, momentarily unsettled, with absolute stubborn truth. The next morning, Clara gave a harsh, quiet order to human resources. I don't want to see that employee on any restricted floor again. Transfer him or fire him. His attitude is a liability. When the maintenance manager later informed her that Daniel had only requested the specific night shift and the restricted floors because he needed the differential pay, working this way until his daughter's first semester tuition was fully saved, Clara merely offered a chilly, dismissive reply. Then that's good. His life will be brighter. Somewhere else. We are not a charity. We are Voss Dynamics. She felt a brief, cold flicker of guilt, quickly extinguished by the necessity of corporate ruthlessness. That very evening, leaving the building as a cold, torrential rain began to fall, Clara was driven past the main security gate. She saw Daniel standing beneath his single, small, battered umbrella, not using it for himself, but sharing it with an elderly, shivering gate guard, ensuring the man didn't get wet waiting for his ride home. Daniel stood half-soaked, his focus entirely on protecting the other man. He does that for me every night, Admiral, the old guard murmured gratefully to Clara's driver as they passed. A good man. Clara just stared into the rain, the powerful CEO momentarily silenced by an act of pure, uncalculated kindness. She quietly instructed the driver to continue. The contradiction, the janitor who worried about a sliver of oil, yet stood half-soaked for another man, was something her perfectly structured world couldn't process. A young maintenance worker later reported, he works slowly because he always ensures no one slips after him. He cleans for the person coming next. He's not cleaning for the boss. He cleans for the weak. If you mock him, Mr. Hayes, he just smiles. He doesn't need your respect to do the right thing. A week later, just past midnight, the crisis exploded. A seismic event that shook the foundation of Voss Dynamics' reputation. The security system, the crowning glory of Voss Dynamics, suffered a catastrophic, unexplained failure. The crisis was not external, but internal. A core logic crash. A high-pitched alarm, code red, screamed through the building, a piercing electronic shriek that paralyzed the night shift. The few hundred night shift employees, mostly data analysts, coders, and support staff, panicked, rushing for the exits, only to find the high-security floors locked down. Clara was trapped in an emergency meeting room on the 28th floor, deep in a critical video conference with a potential billion-dollar defense client. The air immediately thickened with the stench of overheated components and the faint, acrid smoke beginning to seep through the vents. Override the door locks. Initiate emergency evacuation. In Trinionor, she barked into the internal comm system, her voice tense but controlled. But the electronic locks, designed to be unbreakable, were frozen solid. The digital readout on the door panel simply flashed. Access denied, system offline. Down in the sub-levels, amidst the chaos of auxiliary alarms, Daniel Hayes heard the frantic internal alert frequency. His engineer's brain, sharp and unforgiving, recognized the specific cadence of the warning. Not the sound of fire, but the distinct, rhythmic beat of the iron lock protocol initiating its highest-level failsafe. He knew instantly. This was not a real fire. It was a devastating system-wide AI error, misidentifying a cascade failure as a thermal runaway and locking down all secure floors to prevent data breach. The fire doors were not there to keep the fire out. They were there to keep the people in. He didn't hesitate for a microsecond. He grabbed his emergency access keycard, a generic janitor's fob, and a heavy-duty respirator, sprinting toward the 28th floor, running past terrified, huddled employees who saw only a janitor fleeing the scene. When he reached the staging area below the 28th floor, two armed security guards, veterans of the building, attempted to block his ascent. "Stop! This area is restricted. Evacuate!" Daniel's quiet facade dropped completely. He was no longer the janitor. He was the commander. His voice was a whip. "Get out of my way. This is not a fire. This is an iron lock protocol failure. Level 7. If I don't override the tertiary relay, The emergency pressure seals will engage in 3 minutes, and those doors will never open. I wrote the core of this system. Let me pass." The guards hesitated, seeing only the janitor in stained overalls yelling at them. Daniel didn't argue further. He snatched the security chief's emergency master key, the one key designed to manually disable the locks, smashed the internal lock cover on the control room door, and burst inside the auxiliary security booth. "I need access to the core diagnostic terminal," he roared to the stunned, panicked technicians inside. The senior technician, eyes wide with fear, stammered, Who are you? You have no clearance." Daniel ignored him, pulling a small, custom-made diagnostic connector from a hidden pocket in his overalls. He plugged the connector into a hidden tertiary terminal, a sequence he'd built in for maintenance years ago, a pathway that bypassed the entire main system. He slammed his hand on the intercom button, speaking directly to the 28th floor where Clara was trapped. "Admiral Voss, you must not attempt manual override on the door. The system is clean, but the logic is glitched. I am bypassing the thermal failsafe now." "Who is this?" Clara's voice screamed back over the line, laced with smoke and terror. "If I am wrong, terminate me, arrest me, whatever consequences you deem fit," Daniel commanded, his hands flying across the keyboard. "But if I am right, I am saving dozens of lives right now because the system is seconds from sealing them in permanently." Working swiftly in the rapidly thickening smoke, his fingers moved with a terrifying precision, only possible through deep familiarity. He ignored the main glitching console and typed directly into the tertiary terminal, a backdoor sequence that only the original systems architect would know. The on-duty engineer, coughing uncontrollably, stared at the keyboard, unable to process the commands. "What is that password, Mr. Hayes? That's not in any manual?" Daniel typed the final sequence, his face illuminated by the harsh, desperate glow of the screen. "Ghost 06. The system instantly rebooted, the high-pitched shriek of the code red alarm dying into silence. The magnetic door locks disengaged with a loud, simultaneous mechanical hiss across the trapped floors. The massive ventilation system roared, sucking the toxic smoke and panic out of the atmosphere. Employees stumbled out into the clear corridor, gasping, coughing, but safe. Clara, her silk blouse smudged with soot, her perfect hair disheveled, walked out last. Her eyes, normally so cold, were wide and red-rimmed, partly from the smoke, but mostly from the shocking, near-fatal loss of control. She staggered over to the security team. Who just saved the system? Who was on the intercom?" The security chief, utterly humbled and still holding the master key Daniel had snatched, pointed toward the janitor, who was already disconnecting his diagnostic terminal and calmly reaching for the mop he'd dropped. "That's Daniel Hayes, ma'am. The janitor." Clara Voss stood utterly frozen in the residual light of the emergency exit sign. The name Mr. Hayes felt like a lie. A senior engineer later recalled, when he typed Ghost 06, the system didn't just accept it. The command line flashed a single, triumphant confirmation message. "Welcome back, Iron Ghost." The whole control room just stood there, speechless. No one could believe the man who mops the floors, the man we all ignored, held the keys to the entire nation's core security protocol. The following morning, Clara summoned Daniel to her pristine, glass-walled office, the ultimate symbol of her authority, towering over the city. The office felt cold, but the CEO was radiating a nervous heat. She hadn't slept. She didn't sit. She stood, looking out at the skyline, the pride stripped from her posture, replaced by a desperate intellectual curiosity. "Iron Ghost," she began, her voice a low, unsteady echo. "The legend they spoke of, the architect who vanished. That is you." "It was," he confirmed, standing calmly in front of the sweeping view, ignoring the plush guest chair. "Now just Daniel Hayes." "Why?" Clara asked, walking toward him, her hands trembling slightly. Why would a technology visionary, the man who engineered this entire security model, who could command any salary in the world, be mopping floors in the company he essentially created? Why the self-inflicted penance? Daniel looked around the panoramic office, its cold luxury reflecting his old life like a distorted mirror. He saw the city, the contracts, the power, and he felt nothing but the echo of loss. Because this company, he stated, his voice flat, devoid of bitterness, but heavy with years of suppressed pain, signed the contract for the cost-cut, substandard, and fundamentally dangerous equipment used in the research lab where my wife worked. Mara, Lieutenant Mara Hayes, she was the head researcher. The day that equipment failed and exploded due to the fatal flaw I warned them about, I lost her. She died right there, in a cloud of dust and corporate negligence. "Autumn," Clara gasped, placing a trembling hand against the thick glass of the window, as if bracing herself against a physical blow. "I left the industry," Daniel continued, his eyes focused on a distant part of the city. "I left so I wouldn't have to look at this logo, this symbol of profit over life, or your kind, ever again." Clara stood motionless, the magnitude of the connection crushing her carefully constructed reality. "But why come back to clean here? Why subject yourself to the daily degradation?" "I came back not for the money, Clara. I came back because this building is where the failure happened. I returned to clean the stains on the floor of the building where I once poured my heart, to see if the human heart inside this corporation could ever prioritize decency over the bottom line or character over title." He looked at her directly, his eyes holding the pain of a decade. "And frankly, I thought, maybe not, until last night." "Are you indicting me personally? Are you blaming me for a tragedy that happened before I even took this office?" she asked defensively, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'm indicting myself," he countered, his voice softening with self-blame. "I designed a perfect system, a perfect shield, but I failed to protect the single most important person I love. Now I clean the surfaces people walk over, the public face of failure, a constant daily reminder of things that look clean on the outside, but harbor deep, painful stains underneath." Clara swallowed hard, her entire professional identity crumbling under the weight of his quiet, ethical superiority. "I did not know that history, about Mara, about the equipment. I am truly deeply sorry, Daniel, for your loss and for my contempt." "You don't need to be," he replied, finally moving toward the door, accepting neither her apology nor her guilt. "I just clean the floors, the surfaces people walk through and never see the truth beneath." Clara Voss stood utterly motionless, her billion-dollar empire silent around her. Then slowly, painfully, she spoke the words that would irrevocably change her life in the company's trajectory. "I owe you an apology, not just a word, and I owe you a chance to make this company build something right, something worthy of her memory." Clara immediately ordered an unprecedented, comprehensive, deep-dive investigation into the decade-old project files Mara Hayes had been working on. Within 24 hours, the shocking truth was confirmed by the current internal forensics team. Daniel had not only warned the former executive team in writing, but his final, scathing technical protest, buried in the archives, revealed he had vociferously argued against the fatal safety cuts on the lab equipment. The cuts were implemented by her predecessor's executive team purely for budget reasons, ignoring all ethical standards. Daniel had resigned in silent moral protest just hours before the accident. The company was responsible for his wife's death. The truth could not be contained. Clara, realizing the staggering depth of the company's moral rot, refused to let the lawyers manage it. She called an emergency, mandatory town hall meeting, the largest gathering the company had ever seen. Standing before all the staff, she publicly confessed her contempt, her arrogance, and the truth about their humble janitor. "The man I dismissed and looked down upon, the man I ordered removed from this building, is the same man who engineered our most brilliant system and last night saved every single one of your lives," she announced, her voice filled with powerful, unvarnished emotion. "He taught me a lesson that power, authority, and status could never buy. The necessity of quiet humility and the moral requirement of integrity." Daniel Hayes, watching from the back, returned to his normal routine, mop in hand. But the atmosphere was fundamentally altered. From that day forward, no one, not the CEO, not the security guards, not the technicians, walked past him without a respectful nod, a sincere word of thanks, or a shared knowing smile. The ghost had been seen, and the company was forever changed by his quiet presence. A junior analyst wrote in an internal memo that was later circulated throughout the company. "I used to laugh at the janitor, Mr. Hayes. I saw him as beneath me. Now every morning before I touch my keyboard, I wipe down my desk with extra care. It's a silent tribute to Iron Ghost, the man who taught me to always do the right thing, even when no one is watching, and even when it costs you everything." The culture shift at Voss Dynamics was immediate, profound, and utterly irreversible. It was dictated not by a policy memo, but by the powerful, genuine change radiating from the CEO's core. The moral gravity of Daniel's hidden sacrifice had achieved what decades of training seminars and employee motivation programs never could. Clara ordered the corporate motto to be physically removed and replaced. The old cynical and morally bankrupt phrase, "control is power," was ground away from the granite lobby pillar, substituted with a new, resonant, and foundational truth etched in polished steel. Respect is security. It was a daily reminder that the integrity of the people, not the technology, was the true defense. Clara formally offered Daniel a position that bypassed all corporate structure. Honorary senior consultant, the role encompassing technical ethics and system integrity training. The salary was astronomical, the benefits limitless. He politely declined. "Politely, my job remains to keep the surface bright, ma'am," he stated simply, pushing his cleaning cart. "Not to be part of the performance. I need to stay focused on Lily." "No one is forcing you onto a stage, Daniel," she insisted, leaning against his supply cart in the basement. An unthinkable action for a CEO just months prior. "I respect your commitment to Lily, but every day you are here, you are teaching people, and there is one very young person, a leader, who is learning from your example every single day." "Who?" he asked, genuinely curious, looking up from sorting his supplies. Clara smiled, a genuine, warm, and slightly fragile smile, a look no one in the company had ever seen before. "Me." She spent weeks rebuilding the company's ethical foundation, tearing down the legacy of her predecessor. The cost was high, but the result was a corporation with a soul. A month later, at a massive industry conference in Berlin, Clara stood before an audience of thousands of global leaders, giving the opening keynote. Her speech was not about her company's profits, innovations, or future contracts. It was about its soul, or lack thereof. She recounted Daniel's story, the arrogance of the CEO, the humility of the janitor, and the critical night failure that exposed the truth about human value. "I once thought the strongest person in any organization was the one who gave the orders, the one with the highest rank, the one who controlled the most," she told the assembly, her voice powerful and resonant. "It turns out the strongest person is the one who still does the right thing, even when ordered around, when being ignored completely, and when the right thing costs him everything he holds dear." The room was silent for a long moment, then erupted. The entire auditorium, CEOs, politicians, and engineers, rose in a sustained, heartfelt standing ovation. The applause wasn't for the CEO on the stage. It was for the humble man, Daniel Hayes, who was sitting discreetly in the back row, his head bowed, simply watching. The transformation was complete, not just for the company, but for Clara's own identity. Daniel did not take the consulting job, but he did accept an arrangement. He would spend 1 hour every Friday morning with Clara, discussing ethics, not architecture. These meetings were held not in her office, but in his maintenance bay, forcing her to confront the reality beneath the polished surface. He continued his job, though the cleaning hours were adjusted for him to spend more time with Lily. He was still Daniel the janitor, but the very air around him had changed. He was the moral anchor, the conscience of Voss Dynamics. Another year passed, a year of quiet, sustained growth, not just in revenue, but in integrity. The memory of Iron Ghost was no longer a secret. It was a revered, whispered legend, a reminder to every employee to check their moral compass. Daniel, having seen the lasting change and having saved enough for Lily's college fund and a substantial inheritance, felt his final mission was complete. He submitted his final, definitive resignation. He planned to move to a quiet seaside town in Oregon to open a small, ethical trade school, focusing on teaching young people technical integrity and real-world engineering skills, the lessons he learned the hardest way. On his last day, Clara Voss, now a leader visibly softened by compassion and grounded by reality, personally came down to the maintenance floor. She found him in the lobby, finishing his shift, polishing the main lobby floor one last time, the surface gleaming like glass, reflecting the new corporate motto. "This is it, Daniel?" she asked, a sadness in her voice. "You won't ever come back. We need you." "I've left enough of myself here already, Clara," he said, looking at the spotless floor. "The building is clean. The heart of the company is clean. You don't need me anymore. You have Mara's memory and you have your own heart." He paused, looking toward the door where the sun was beginning to rise. "Now it's time to teach my daughter how to keep her own heart clean, not just a floor. That's my only remaining job." Clara stepped forward. She didn't hug him. Their relationship was too formal, too rooted in respect. But she took his hand, scarred from the fire and healed from the burns, now warm and firm. "Thank you, Daniel," she whispered, her voice thick with genuine emotion. "Thank you, Iron Ghost. You saved more than lives. You saved the company's soul." He smiled, a light, genuine sound, the sound of a man finally free from his penance. "Please, just call me Daniel. Call me. Ghost is just an old name. Now, I'm finally living for real." As he walked out for the last time carrying his small duffel bag, he passed the massive granite column in the lobby. He glanced at the new motto, "Respect is security." He nodded once, a silent approval, and stepped into the sunshine. Clara did not allow the janitor's supply closet to be used again. She had a small, elegant, and inconspicuous plaque installed in the main corridor, next to the very cleaning supply closet where Daniel had worked. Dedicated to Daniel Hayes, the man who taught us that true power is found in the willingness to clean your own house. A year later, Daniel was running his trade school, teaching kids not just circuits, but ethics. Lily, now a bright-eyed 9-year-old, was his proudest student. The legacy of Iron Ghost persisted at Voss Dynamics. A new employee interviewing for a security position wrote on a private forum, "I never met him, but every morning when I wipe down my desk, I see the quote subtly etched on the wall above my screen, Clara's personal mandate, which reads, 'Keep your heart clean.' And I finally understand why they still remember the name Iron Ghost." The ultimate paradox. The highest-ranking person in the building became the student of the man who cleaned its lowest floors. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.